The station clock read 5:43 p.m. when Helen stepped off the bus, her gait measured and deliberate. At 72, her stooped shoulders carried not only the weight of years, but also a faded school backpack that seemed out of place in her wrinkled hands. Her gray hair, pulled back in a simple bun, framed a face etched with lines that told tales of a lifetime dedicated to others. She wore a brown coat that had seen better days and worn shoes that echoed softly on the cold station floor. Helen wasn't like the other passengers rushing toward their destinations. She walked slowly, not out of laziness or lack of purpose, but because each step was calculated, each movement a small victory over joints protesting against time. In her hands, besides the backpack, she carefully held a spiral notebook and a blue pen that gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights of the station. Helen's destination on this Thursday afternoon was the same as every Thursday for the past 2 years: the City Adult Education Center, located 3 blocks from the station. There, along with 22 other students of varying ages, she was pursuing the elementary education she'd never had the opportunity to complete in her youth. Life had demanded other priorities: caring for her younger siblings after her parents died young, working since she was 12 to support her family, marrying young, and dedicating herself entirely to raising her 5 children. When she arrived at the school, Helen politely greeted the security guard, climbed the stairs at her unhurried pace, and headed to the classroom. She was always one of the first to arrive, not out of anxiety, but out of a sense of responsibility that had been with her since childhood. She sat in the 3rd row, always in the same seat, and meticulously organized her materials on the desk: notebook, pen, a small ruler, and a simple pencil case she'd received as a gift from one of her granddaughters. Miss Miller, a young woman in her 30s, had developed a special fondness for Helen. She observed how the older woman focused on the explanations with an intensity that few younger students demonstrated. Helen didn't speak much during class, but when asked, she always responded with a soft, thoughtful voice that revealed a natural wisdom developed over decades of experience. That particular afternoon, Miss Miller had prepared a writing assignment, asking students to write about their dreams and future aspirations. It was an exercise that usually worked well with the class, as it allowed everyone to share a bit of their personal history while practicing their writing. Helen received the instruction sheet and read it carefully, her eyes scanning each word with attention. While the other students began writing almost immediately, Helen remained silent for a few minutes, her pen hovering over the paper. It wasn't hesitation or a lack of ideas, but rather the depth of thoughts that needed to be organized before taking written form. Finally, she began to write in careful, elegant handwriting that contrasted with the simplicity of her appearance. "My biggest dream," Helen wrote, "has always been to learn to read the stars in books." The opening sentence of her essay caught Miss Miller's attention as she circulated around the room observing the students' progress. There was something poetic in those words that revealed a sensitive soul behind the woman's modest appearance. Helen continued writing, recounting how she had spent her whole life caring for others, how she had given up her own dreams to ensure that her children had opportunities she never had. She wrote about the nights when, after a full day of housework and family care, she stayed awake watching her children sleep and dreaming of the day she could sit at a school desk and learn the things that had always fascinated her. As the time for the activity was ending, Helen was still writing with the same concentration as at the beginning. Miss Miller discreetly approached and read over her shoulder a few lines of what the woman had written. The words were simple, but charged with a genuine emotion that deeply touched the teacher's heart. "Today, at 72, Helen's text continued, "I no longer have time for big dreams, but I have time for small miracles. Every word I learn to write correctly is a miracle. Every book I can read from beginning to end is a miracle. Every time I can help my grandchildren with their homework is a miracle that wouldn't have fit in my youth." Miss Miller felt a lump in her throat as she read those words. There was something in Helen's simplicity and honesty that made her question her own concepts of education, about dreams, and about the meaning of success in life. This woman, who always arrived punctually to class despite facing a 20-minute commute and walk, represented a pure form of dedication to learning that few of her younger students demonstrated. When Helen finished her essay, she handed it to the teacher with a shy smile. "Miss Miller, I hope it's all right. I still have trouble with some words, but I tried my best with the handwriting." Miss Miller received the paper and, upon reading it completely, felt deeply touched not only by Helen's life story, but by the way she viewed learning as a gift, not an obligation. After class, while the other students rushed out to their evening obligations, Helen spent a few minutes organizing her materials with her usual care. Miss Miller approached and asked if she could talk to her for a few moments. Helen accepted, curious but not anxious. "Helen, I read your essay, and I was so moved by your words," said Miss Miller. "You have a natural talent for writing, a sensitivity that many professional writers would envy." Helen smiled, a little embarrassed by the praise. "Oh, Miss Miller, you're too kind. I just wrote what I feel in my heart." It was at that moment that Miss Miller made a decision that would change not only Helen's life, but her own as well. "Helen, I'd like to propose something. How about you write more pieces like this? Your words have the power to touch people, to make them reflect on their own lives. I could help you develop this skill." Helen was surprised by the proposal. She had never considered that her words could have value beyond a school assignment. "But Miss Miller, I'm just a senior citizen learning to write properly. Who would be interested in my words?" "Exactly the people who need to be reminded that it's never too late to dream, to learn, to grow," replied Miss Miller. "Your words carry a truth that many people need to hear these days." In the months that followed, Helen began to write regularly, always with Miss Miller's encouragement and guidance. Her texts spoke about the beauty of small moments, the importance of cherishing the present, the wisdom that comes with age, and the courage needed to start over when most people have given up. Miss Miller decided to share some of Helen's writings on her social media, always with Helen's permission. The response was astonishing. People of all ages began commenting, sharing, and being moved by the simple yet profound words of this senior citizen who had discovered her voice at 72. One day, while Helen was writing a new piece about the importance of not giving up on dreams regardless of age, Miss Miller approached with a radiant expression on her face. "Helen, you won't believe what happened. A publisher contacted me. They want to publish a book of your writings." Helen looked at Miss Miller with an expression of disbelief. "A book with my writings? Miss Miller, are you sure there's no mistake?" Miss Miller laughed, moved. "There's no mistake, Helen. Your words have touched thousands of people. You've become an inspiration." And here, dear readers, I ask you to pause for a moment to reflect on Helen's story. How many times have we given up on our dreams because we think it's too late? How many times have we refrained from trying something new because we think we're too old for it? Helen's story teaches us that it's never too late to discover our talents, to learn something new, to inspire other people. If you're enjoying this story and want to continue receiving content that inspires and moves you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell to be notified whenever we post new videos. Your subscription helps us continue sharing stories that can change lives, just as Helen's changed the lives of thousands. News of the book spread quickly through the school and the community where Helen lived. Her children, who had always supported her educational journey but never imagined she would become a writer, were extremely proud. Her grandchildren, who used to ask for help with their homework, now looked at their grandmother with a new kind of admiration. On the day of the book launch, titled "Never Too Late to Dream," a small crowd gathered at the local library. Helen, wearing her best dress and with her hair carefully styled, sat behind a table with stacks of her books. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from pure emotion. The first person to buy the book was Miss Miller, her teacher and mentor. "Helen, you can't imagine how proud I am to have been your teacher. You taught me as much as I taught you." Helen hugged Miss Miller with tears in her eyes. "Miss Miller, without you, none of this would have been possible. You saw something in me that I never knew existed." During the launch event, several people approached Helen to talk. There were other adult education students inspired by her story. There were younger people who felt demotivated in their careers and found in Helen's journey a reason not to give up. There were seniors who had given up on learning new things and now felt encouraged to try again. A woman of about 60 approached Helen with tear-filled eyes. "Mrs. Helen, I read your articles online and they changed my life. I had given up on going back to school because I thought I was too old. Today, inspired by your story, I enrolled in school." Helen held the woman's hands affectionately. "My dear, age is just a number. What matters is the desire we have in our hearts. If you feel like learning, then it's the right time." As the evening progressed, Helen autographed dozens of books. Each autograph was accompanied by a conversation, a piece of advice, a word of encouragement. She had become, without realizing it, not only a writer, but a counselor, a living inspiration that it's possible to start over at any stage of life. When the event ended and people began to disperse, Helen remained alone in the library for a few minutes, observing the shelves full of books. Miss Miller approached and asked, "What are you thinking about, Helen?" "I'm thinking about how mysterious life is, Miss Miller," Helen replied. "For 70 years, I thought my destiny was just to take care of others. I never imagined that one day I would be the person others would seek for inspiration. I never imagined that my words could make a difference in someone's life." "And now, what are your next dreams?" asked Miss Miller. Helen smiled, a serene smile full of possibilities. "Now I know I can dream without haste, but also without fear. I want to keep writing, I want to keep learning. Maybe I'll even learn to use a computer? Maybe I'll start writing another book?" Months later, Helen not only learned to use a computer, but also started a blog where she shared reflections on life, tips on tackling the challenges of aging, and inspiring stories of other people who, like her, discovered new talents in later life. Her blog became a virtual meeting place for people of all ages seeking motivation to not give up on their dreams. Helen personally responded to comments, creating a supportive community and continuing to write with the same passion and dedication she showed at her classes at the City Adult Education Center. A year after the release of her first book, Helen received an invitation she never thought possible. A local university wanted her to give a lecture to education students on the importance of lifelong learning and the transformative power of learning at any age. On the day of the lecture, Helen arrived at the university with her usual punctuality, wearing an elegant outfit she had bought especially for the occasion. The auditorium was packed, not only with education students, but also with professors, educators, and people interested in her story. When Helen stepped onto the stage, there was a moment of respectful silence. She looked at the audience, took a deep breath, and began to speak with the same soft and reflective voice that her students from the City Adult Education Center knew well. "My dear young people," Helen began, "you have chosen one of the most important professions in the world, to educate. But today, I'd like to talk to you about something even more important: the ability to let yourself be educated by life, to keep learning always, to see in each student not just someone who needs to learn, but someone who also has something to teach." Helen told her story, from her first days at the City Adult Education Center to the moment she discovered her talent for writing. She talked about the importance of teachers like Miss Miller, who see potential where others see limitations. She talked about the beauty of discovering that it's never too late to develop new talents. "You will be teachers," Helen continued, "but I hope you never stop being students. I hope you always maintain the humility to learn from your students, regardless of their age. In my adult education class, there are people from 17 to 80 years old. Each of them has a unique story, a particular wisdom, a dream that deserves to be respected. Helen's lecture became a landmark at the university. Many students left with a new perspective on what it means to be an educator. Some veteran professors were moved as they remembered why they had chosen the profession. Several educators present reconsidered their methodologies and began to pay more attention to the life stories of their older students. After the lecture, Helen was surrounded by young students who wanted to talk to her, ask questions, and ask for advice. A 20-year-old student approached with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Helen, my grandmother always wanted to learn to read, but she always thought it was too late. Can I show her your writings?" "Of course, my dear," Helen replied. "And tell your grandmother that, if she wants, I'll always be available to talk. Sometimes all we need is someone who believes in us." As the years passed, Helen continued writing, studying, and inspiring people. She graduated from elementary school and decided to continue her studies, entering high school. Her younger teachers frequently asked her opinion on various subjects, recognizing that her life experience was a valuable complement to academic knowledge. Helen also became a volunteer in literacy programs for seniors, using her own story as an example that it's never too late to learn. She visited nursing homes, community centers, and senior groups, always with her serene smile and words of encouragement. In one of these meetings, Helen met Robert, a 78-year-old man who had given up on learning to read after several failed attempts. "Mrs. Helen," Robert said, "I've tried so many times, but my head doesn't work like it used to. I think it's too late for me." Helen looked at Robert with the same tenderness with which she looked at everyone who doubted themselves. "Robert, can I tell you something? When I started studying, I also thought my head didn't work anymore. But I discovered that it did work, just in a different way. Slower perhaps, but with much more wisdom." Robert agreed to try again, and Helen offered to help him personally. Every week they met at the public library, where Helen patiently helped him with the letters, words, and sentences. 6 months later, Robert was able to read his first complete book, and Helen was there to celebrate with him. The story of Helen and Robert spread through the community, inspiring other seniors not to give up on their dreams of learning. The public library created a special literacy program for seniors, with Helen as a volunteer coordinator. One afternoon, while Helen was helping a group of new elderly students at the library, Marina, her former teacher, showed up to visit her. The two women embraced with the affection of old friends. "Helen, do you have any idea of the impact you've had on the lives of so many people?" Helen smiled, that serene smile that had become her trademark. "Marina, I just did what anyone would do. I shared a little of what I learned over time. There's nothing extraordinary about that." "But that's precisely what's extraordinary," Miss Miller replied. "Your humility, your generosity, your ability to see beauty where others see only hardship. You've become so much more than a writer, Helen. You've become a beacon of hope." That night, Helen took her usual bus home, but she carried a different kind of baggage. Besides her school bag, she carried dozens of stories of people whose lives she had touched. She carried the certainty that she had found her true purpose in life. Upon arriving home, Helen sat at her desk, opened her notebook, and began to write another piece. This time, she wrote about the importance of believing in one's dreams, regardless of age or circumstances. She wrote about how each person has a unique talent waiting to be discovered. She wrote about the beauty of never stopping learning, growing, and transforming. The last lines of her text read, "I've discovered that no matter how many years we have, there's always a new version of ourselves waiting to be born. We just need the courage to take that first step. to believe that we deserve more than just existing. We deserve to live fully, to dream big, and to leave our mark on the world, even if it's just through small gestures of love and encouragement. Helen closed her notebook, looked out the window at the starry sky, and smiled. She had discovered that her life wasn't just about the dreams she had realized, but about the dreams she had helped others realize. And that discovery, made at 72, was the greatest treasure she could have found.